Hello, everyone. This is Andrea Ribick. I'm the Director of Communications at HL7 International. Welcome and thank you for joining us today. Brendan, are you ready?
Yep, I'm ready. All right,
I'm going to share your screen.
All right, give me a thumbs up when that's coming across.
I can see it now. So everyone, this is Microsoft Azure API for FHIR, and your speaker today is Brendan Kowitz. Brendan, the floor is yours.
Cool, thank you. All right, and welcome everyone. Today I'm talking about Microsoft Azure API for FHIR. And to get started, I just want to introduce myself a little bit. There we go. Okay, so who am I? My name is Brendan Kowitz. I'm a software engineering lead at Microsoft. The picture that you can see over on the right-hand side, so that's me and my family at Loomy Island in Washington State. So I took that photo last summer, but it is sunny again, so I thought I would go with the theme. And to try to get to know me a little better, so the things I like: open source, FHIR, coffee, red wine. So into all of those things. And I thought in the spirit of DevDays, I'd have a little bit of a challenge to go at sort of combining all the things I like into one emoji. And this is what I come up with, which is, kind of like a health, FHIR, ninja, hipster cat. But I guess in the spirit of, failing fast and admitting when things are not going well, I digress on that one. Anyway, so moving on. What are we going to talk about today? So also in the spirit of DevDays, I wanted to phrase things as we hear it at FHIR DevDays as FHIR developers. So as a FHIR developer, here's the story that I want us to get through. So I'm going to cover some of the basics, but not everything that you've seen before. So how we deploy a FHIR server in both the managed service and the open source. Then I'm going to have a look at the start of the life cycle. So we want to convert data from HL7 v2 into FHIR, and we're going to have a look at the tools that are available to do that. Then I'm going to have a look at how we can enhance the data once it's sort of added into our FHIR server. And then at some point later, once all the data is in the FHIR server and working well, we're going to have a look at some of the tools that we can use to export. So in the case today, we're going to have a look at anonymized export. And then finally, we're going to have a brief look at some of the tools that you can just pick up to use to start analyzing the data. And then down the bottom, I want to highlight throughout the journey what's available in open source and what you can use independently as open source tools and what is integrated into our cloud-based workflows. Okay, so if you've seen me talk before, you may have seen the next two slides. But I think it's important to clear these things up before we continue. So Microsoft have two FHIR server products. Both have FHIR and Azure in the name. And this is the difference. So the first one is FHIR Server for Azure. So FHIR Server for Azure is our open source product. So that's the one that you're going to find on GitHub. You can see all of the code, all the latest features that we're developing. You can create bugs, download it, run it locally in your own subscription. See all of the new features that we're working on. It's all here. We also have some newer features such as beta versions of R5 if you want to sort of play around with early access things that are not quite ready for the managed service yet. Azure API for FHIR, on the other hand. So this is the fully managed enterprise-grade FHIR service. So when you go to the Azure portal, this is the one that you're going to be deploying. So this one, you are going to expect all of the things that come with being hosted in Azure as your scalable, secure, production-ready endpoint. And how does that look on the application stack? So if you go with the open source server, you're basically responsible for pretty much everything. So you're responsible for the application code, the data, the database, updates, security, auditing. It's sort of like all falling on your plate. But if you're going with Azure API for FHIR, which is the managed service, all of that section in blue there is what Microsoft is managing and running for you. So to use an analogy of a colleague, Basically, the Microsoft engineers are sort of running around wearing the pages in this case. So there's less for you to do, and definitely, recommended, I think, for a production FHIR service and system. All right. So before we move on, I really want us to have a look at what's new in the managed service. So what have we been hard at work releasing sort of, I think, since the last DevDays? So one of the biggest headlining features that we've been able to put out is custom search parameters. So I will be giving a bit of a demo of this later on, but this is the ability to add search parameters to virtually any FHIR property that didn't previously exist in the base spec. And the FHIR search in the base spec is what we've sort of had up until today. So on top of that, we've also released some support for chained and reverse chain search. We've improved our data conversion with liquid templates. We have now a validate function, member match, conditional delete. We've improved our sorting capability. So now you have sort on things like clinical dates and patient fields. Patient everything is merged into the open source product. So that's going to flow into the managed service sometime soon. We've also done a little bit of enhancement to the anonymized export. So you can now do that from the group level as well. This is really exciting stuff. Like this is one of the reasons why I wanted to sort of get up and also give this presentation. Very excited about this. And before we go forward, I also want to highlight the growing number of like open source libraries that we have. Sometimes like it also like I forget about it, and it surprises me like just the number of goodness that we've sort of like covered in the past couple of years. So we've already talked about the FHIR server for Azure, but there's also the FHIR converter, which I'll be giving a small demo of today as well. The FHIR tools for anonymization, so we'll cover just a little bit of that. Then there's a FHIR proxy. So that's another open source library or repository that allows you to intercept FHIR requests and sort of include your own business logic without needing to actually extend the FHIR server itself. So health architectures, we'll mention that in a few more slides. Then there's two sort of FHIR libraries related to sort of like high frequency IoT data. And finally, the open source DICOM server. So although DICOM is not FHIR itself, it does include DICOM cast, which is basically the ability to synchronize DICOM metadata into your FHIR server. And if you want to find out about any of these open source libraries, you can sort of hit our documentation page at the bottom and sort of read a little bit more about it. Okay, so the first thing I want to do today is, as a FHIR developer, I want to deploy a secure environment. So if I did that in the managed service, I'm going to get, sort of naturally all of the things that come out of the box in Azure, like, role-based access control, security, scalability, and things like that. But because we realize how important security really is to folks in health data, we wanted to sort of go a little bit further. So we've added the ability to use isolated private networks. And what this means is that your FHIR endpoint will no longer be exposed to the public internet. So it can basically join the other Azure services that are also available on your sort of own isolated private network. We also wanted to go further again, because health data is important. I'm going to keep saying it as well. So we wanted to add more security that you're able to bring yourself. So we also now support bring your own encryption key. So this means that you're able to upload your own encryption key that the FHIR server will use to encrypt your data at rest. If you want to find out about any of these features, you can sort of like hit those links below. All right, so I just want to jump into the Azure portal for a bit of a quick demo. So in here, you would come in, you would hit create. So this is just the standard sort of information. So in networking now, this is where you're going to find that private endpoint button. And when you hit add, so this is going to give you the ability to attach to a new or existing private network. So in Azure terms, it's also known as private link. So I'm going to cancel out of here. I'm not going to create this right now. Go back across to public network and in advanced settings. So this is where we're going to see the customer managed key. So a fairly simple setup. If you have a key vault that's running in your own subscription, this gives you the ability to basically specify the name of the key And that's what our service will fetch and start encrypting your data at rest with. Okay, so flipping back over to the slides. So we need a little bit more than that. So we have the FHIR server, that's great, but often a FHIR server is sort of a participant in a greater ecosystem. So here are the resources that we have available to sort of like accelerate you towards the ecosystem that you want or the learning that you're trying to do. So health architectures. So this is basically a collection of reference architectures that sort of illustrate the end-to-end best practices when sort of using FHIR-related technologies. In the middle, we have FHIR Open Hacks. So this one takes a little bit of a different approach. So it allows you to do like challenges and deep dives into like very specific areas. And FHIR Server Samples is more sort of geared towards like your minimalistic, lightweight sandbox environment if you just sort of want to experiment around and sort of play around with some of the features. So I put some arrows here. So these are the generalized areas that I'll be talking about today if you wanted to sort of pick up one of these other repositories and go a lot deeper. So we're looking at the conversion aspects, the FHIR server itself, and then of course the export. All right, so now we're getting into the fairly advanced stuff, but don't worry, please come along with me for this journey. So as a FHIR developer, I want to convert data and I want to and validate it. So I want to make sure that my data is correct. So for this one, I'm going to use two different open source tools. So one is a free Visual Studio extension that we've developed, and the other one is the FHIR Converter. So FHIR Converter is available as its own open source independent library that you could download and use from the CLI, but it's also integrated directly into both of our FHIR servers as the data convert operation. If you want to have a bit more of a deep dive into this, I advise you to check out my colleague Ranvijay's presentation, who will just be covering the FHIR Converter and mapping. All right, so let's jump into this demo. All right, so here I am in the portal, and like I said, let's assume that we've already deployed the FHIR server. We've got our export account up the top, and we've got an Azure Container Registry down the bottom. So the export storage account is where we're going to put the data. The Azure Container Registry, that's where we're going to store our templates. So let's jump in here, and the one thing we need in here right now is I'm just going to go copy the endpoint. So that's what I'm going to need to sort of upload my templates a little bit later on. So I'm jumping into Visual Studio Code now. And the first thing I want to do is create a new converter workspace. So we're setting up our data conversion templates. So I've got a folder already ready to go. So I'm going to make a templates folder in here. So this is where I'm going to put the templates that we will edit. And the next one is, let's make a data folder. And then we can save the actual workspace name. So just demo, it's fine. All right, so Visual Studio Code just reloaded and it's got our project ready to go. But I don't want to start from scratch. I want to start with a little bit of demo data and some pre-existing templates. So what I'm going to do here is I can use a command from the FHIR Converter to basically pull some Microsoft standard templates. So we're focusing on HL7v2 and the latest version is fine. Tell them where to download to. All right, so there they are on the left. It didn't take long, but they've already downloaded into our project. And next we want to grab some sample data. So we want to have some data that's going to work with our templates. All right, so again, that didn't take too long. Now we've got some data and templates. So it's taken us like just a few minutes to sort of get started here. So I want to test out the conversion. So if I open up one of these sample files, I can sort of see the sample Donald Duck record. If I hit convert data, it's going to give me this error that says, no, you've got to set the context up. So the first thing I need to do, I'm just going to select this ADT template. So set that as the context. And if I hit convert again, it's going to say, well, you need the data file for the conversion as well. So we can set the context there. Oops. And after we do that, then we can hit convert and we can sort of see the preview output here. So there's the liquid template, and this is the resulting FHIR bundle. So now I know our templates are working well. The next thing I want to do is I think they're ready to upload. So to do that, let's open up. Let's copy it. All right, so I'm going to open up the commands again, and I'm going to say log into that container registry. So this is the one that you just saw in the Azure portal. And that piece of information that I had copied, I'm pasting that in again. I'm going to paste in a username and password here as well. Super secret. All right, so now that's done, we should be ready to push up our templates. Simple as the push command, and we just need to give it a name and a tag. So I'm just going to say demo default in this case. Select the template folder again. And it only takes a few seconds, but we're done. So we've got our first batch of templates all uploaded. Okay, so the templates are there. We've got a FHIR server, but we need to make sure that the FHIR server knows how to use these templates. So the next step in this is we need to come into the FHIR server and just need to check that managed identity is turned on. So this is your FHIR server's service principal. And this is going to allow the FHIR server to securely connect to other Azure resources. So once we know that's there, we can come back over to the container registry and just hit the access control. Once we're here, we can add, make a role assignment. So the access that the FHIR server needs is pool access. So we just need to make sure that that is set up here. And this is where I can put directly in the FHIR service principal name. So there it is. Let's come straight up, save that. Okay, I think we're almost there. So the one more thing that we have to do now is go back to the FHIR server. So I'm just going to go back via the resource group. And once we're here, we can scroll down to the data transformation tab. And once we're here, we can hit add. And now our Azure Container Registry, which is the top one, should be available to us. And once we register this and save, so we've now completed all of the access we need. So the FHIR server knows where to go to get the templates, and the Azure Container Registry is giving access for the FHIR server to pull those templates down. Okay, so let's try out the API calls. So I've dragged in some sample requests here back into Visual Studio Code. So this is going to be my REST client. So we're going to hit the data convert operation. So here we've got, again, an HL7v2 sample data message. And if you didn't upload any templates, you can actually use the sample ones, like the default sample ones, which are okay to get started. So here I can see the resulting FHIR bundle. So now remember, this is coming directly back from my FHIR server that I have set up, from the operation that's all built in. But I want to test that this resource is valid, because I'm not so sure. So I'm just going to copy it out, straight out of the request. And if I scroll below a bit, so I've got a validate operation all set up. So remembering this is also another new operation that we've added. Okay, this will take a few seconds, but it is sending in now. And now we get an operation outcome. So there was something wrong with this patient. And if we scroll down here, we'll be able to realize that I think it is the phone numbers. So the telecom did not have a system. I want to correct this error because I want my data to be 100% valid. So remember, we've got our template workspace already all set up. So I am using a little bit of contextual knowledge here. But I do know that the phone number conversion is done in this XTN template. So what I'm going to do is just paste in the FHIR code system. All right, so I'm just going to add system is phone. But now I need to push this template up so it's ready for my FHIR server to use. So I can use that push templates command again. And instead of having default, I'm just going to change the label to V2. just so we know it's different. Get that templates folder. Okay, that only took a few seconds, and I think it's ready to go. So I'm jumping straight back over to my REST client now. Still got my sample data in there, and now I'm just going to paste in that same label that I just used, so demo v2, sending the request straight back into the FHIR server. It's going to go and access the templates out of the Azure Container Registry, and I'm going to copy out the patient again, just so I can recheck if it's valid. All right, so we're gonna remove the old one, paste in the new one. All right, let's send this in and see how it goes. So again, it's just gonna spin up for a few seconds while it does the complex process of validation. And now we can see it's 100% ready to go. So I've got a valid patient that we've converted out of HL7v2. And if we zoom in there, you can see that the system phone has been converted correctly from our templates. Okay, that is the end of the demo that I had for setting up convert and also using the validate operation. So now that we have the data being converted, validated, and coming into our FHIR server, the next thing that we want to do is enhance that data with custom search parameters. So this is about adding those parameters that were just not there before, like different FHIR properties, or maybe we've seen some implementation guides come out and we want to try to meet compatibility with those. And if you want to deep dive just in this area, then I recommend my colleague Caitlin's talk, who will be going through how to set this up against a FHIR server. Okay, so again, we're going to come straight back to the REST client now. We've got the patient there. And what I'm going to do, because it's a custom search parameter, is I'm going to paste in some US core extensions. So this is just US core extensions that are defining, I think, race and birth sex. But I want this to be part of this demo patient, so I can add a custom search parameter against it. And instead of sending it to the validate endpoint, I'm now just going to post it to the patient endpoint, so it goes in as a new patient record. Okay, so it says 201 created, and we can see the extension is there. All right, this is perfect. Okay, so I'm going to scroll down to the next request. All right, so I'm going to do a GET request to see if there's any custom search parameters in the system. And here I can see there's not been one created yet. So I'm going to create one, which is going to let us index the US core race from our patient data. So this is straight out of the implementation guide. And if I send that in, that's going to be accepted by the server. So it is created. And just to prove it's there, we can go up and do another GET request. And now we can sort of see that one search parameter is being returned, but it's not ready to be used yet. So when you add a search parameter, all new data is indexed, but all existing data needs to be re-indexed to sort of make sure that the indexes are up to date and consistent. And to sort of prove this, and what you might see is that if I right now did a search on race, I can see the warning in the operation outcome in the bundle, and I can see that it's been dropped from the self link. Yep, so it is not yet supported. So to help you with testing, we actually have an experimental header that you can add to your search requests, which says use partial indices, which says, I don't really mind if it's consistent or not. I just want to test out that my search parameters are behaving. So to update the rest of the data, we can call this reindex function. So this is going to give us the status of the job, which is queued. And the most important part here is this content location. So that is going to allow us to sort of like follow the progress of this job. So I'm going to copy that out now so I can poll that a few times to see what the current status is. So just a simple GET request, and remember our authorization. Okay, so here we can see it's still queued, and I think I'll probably just hold my breath and wait a few more seconds. And okay, so if we try again, there's only a few records in the database. All right, so it's found 2 records. It's indexed them. We can see the status is complete. So our data is now all consistent, and that search parameter has now been turned on. So if I come down here and do another search on this race code, it has worked, it has been accepted, but there's no results for this particular code. So if I change it to a different one and do another search, then in this case, I can see that there's been results returned. All right, this is perfect. And this is how you can continue to add new search parameters to your data. All right. Okay, so back to the slides. So far on the journey, we have we've created a FHIR server in a secure environment. We've converted the data, we've validated it, we've enhanced it now with these custom search parameters. And the next thing we want to do is export. So our FHIR servers right now support a bunch of the endpoints already in the export spec. So we have just the population level export, we have patient level export, and also you can export from a group. But we thought, how can we make the anonymization function like really first class? Because we don't want like these records to basically leave the FHIR server in an identified format. So if you want to de-identify on export, we've added an extra parameter to the export function, which just allows you to specify the anonymization config. So let's go through and have a look at how we can set this up ready to perform an export request. Oh, and I said I was going to keep calling this out, but the FHIR tools for anonymization, the same function that you're seeing above, is also available in open source as a separate CLI if you wanted to sort of download it and run it locally. All right, so I'm back over in the same spot. And to make this a little more interesting, I've got some pre-prepared patient batch bundles here. So I'm going to post those up. These are going to take a few seconds. I think each bundle has about 500 resources each. So it's even taking a while to format that result. Okay, so that's one. I'm going to post up batch bundle number 2. Again, that one's going to take a few more seconds. And to save on time, I'm probably just going to skip uploading number 3 so we can get to the good stuff. All right, so let's come down to the export request and let's understand what's going on. So when we call export, we can see the container name is export. So that's the storage account container that this is going to go into. So back in the Azure portal, we can see the export part and then anonymization config. So this is a sample configuration that I'm using to de-identify my data. So jumping back over here, you can see configuration JSON. So this is a bunch of sample rules that you can basically use or customize. That's just doing things like if it should redact or crypto hash or what it should do for each of the elements that it finds. And now when we send that in, so again, it's going to give us back that familiar content location as this is an async operation. And I've got a GET request pre-prepared down here. And let's follow the status of this. Okay, so it's already said that it's exported 64 observations and 937 patients into those files that are specified above. And of course, the one search parameter that we've added as well. Okay, so let's have a look at one of those files. What's in there? What has it done? All right, so all I'm going to do here is just refresh this folder. I can click into this folder here. And you can see the 3 files that we just saw in the response. I'm going to download patient. Now let's just save that and open it in Visual Studio Code. And now this is ND.json, so there's a lot of JSON resources all stacked in here. So to make it easier, I'm just going to copy out the first record, put it into its own document, and I'm going to tell it it's JSON and just format this so we can see. All right, so here you can see things like postcodes have been generalized. Some of the codes have been redacted. And yep, So using, and the crypto hash there is applying to the patient ID at the top. So yeah, so this record now is de-identified. Things like name have been completely removed. Parts of the address have also been removed. So we should be in now a good place going forward to sort of use this in machine learning scenarios. Okay, so this brings us to the next part of the talk. So we're up to the part now where we've exported with anonymization, and now we're ready to do some analytics. So there's a number of paths that you could choose to use here. So if you wanted to go directly against the FHIR API, then you could use something like the Power BI connector, or you could use, Smart on FHIR apps. So both of those are supported. But with exported data, this is kind of now opening up a world of other powerful tools. So the one that, so we'll be looking at one in particular today. So we're just going to use like a Databricks notebook. But if you're interested in going further into Power BI, you can see my colleague Ranvijay's talk. Or if you're interested in going deeper into ML, then you can also jump onto my colleague Steve's talk, which is tomorrow morning. All right, so let's have a look at setting up Databricks. So jumping back over to the resource group here, just going to search for the Azure resource, Azure Databricks. And let's create. So I'm going to go with a lot of the defaults right now. Just going to call it demo. Putting my initials at the front so it makes it easier for me to clean up later. Okay, so validation succeeded. Let's create that. All right, this should take, I think, only a few seconds to set up the workspace. And then we're going to jump over to create the resource. Then we'll jump over to the workspace itself. Okay, so now we're here. We're going to jump over to the workspace part of this, which is Databricks. And once we're here, we're going to go through and just create like a blank notebook. And again, I'm going to go with the creative term of demo. And in here, I've got some sample commands already prepared. So I'm going to paste them in so you don't have to watch me type anything here. So there is a storage account. So we're connecting to that export folder or container that we just set up and saw before. So now we can do some things like we want to consume that ND.json file as a temporary table. And do the same for patient. And now let's do something interesting. So let's try to look for patient heights and patient weights. So you may need to actually check those redaction settings to make sure that these codes are not removed or that they're de-identified in a way that makes sense for your scenario. And then at the bottom, we can do a simple SQL query to start joining this stuff together. So if we go back up to the top, I have run that first command already. So I'm going to start on the second one. So we can see these jobs being sent over to Spark jobs, all being completed. And down the bottom here, now we can see, where these patients have basically been joined into the weight and height values. I think I was a little short on observations, but you can definitely get the idea that now we're able to consume those files in ND.json format, pull them into the Databricks notebook here, and here is basically the platform that opens up to some really more advanced machine learning models. So yeah, this is really just showing you how to get started and scratch the surface. So coming back to the slides, I think we've made it all the way through now, sort of that end-to-end scenario. But again, coming back to open source, I love open source basically because it's free for you to use and you can actually, it's transparent. You can see all the code that's there. So in the open source FHIR code base, we support 2 different providers. So you've got SQL, which has like a highly capable data store that has, like a lot of advanced search features, or your Cosmos data store that sort of handles very large sort of data sets in a scalable way. So we've done a little bit of optimization as to how you can deploy these now. So you can use both web-based deployments or Docker containers. And just jumping back over to the portal. So this is the one that we've just set up previously. So if you're using Bing, I'm just going to try to find the FHIR server repository, and it just happens to be number 1. Okay, so if I come to the docs folder, let's go down to default deployment. And what we're going to do in here is just look for the big blue deploy to Azure button. So this is should be the easiest way to get started in open source. So we've consolidated the number of templates we had down. So all the options now, after this bootstraps into the template, into the portal. So all the parameters here have been combined into the one template with a bunch of select boxes. So you can really just configure what you want in a very easy place that's just one place to come to get everything for the open source server. All right, so I'm not going to deploy that now. I think we've seen FHIR servers deploying for one demonstration. Okay, so coming back to this, thank you, I guess, to the open source community already that have been using the open source FHIR server, and those that have sort of sent in contributions and logged bugs. We look at them frequently. They're very valuable to us. So yeah, keep up the good contributions here. If you really want to decode something and want to know where to get started, the team and I will go through and sort of mark things as up for grabs. So these are things that are not high on our priority list, but have like fairly low context to sort of get in there and get started. So yeah, really looking forward to everyone's contributions. Okay, so the key takeaways from today's presentation. So we've described what's new in Azure API for FHIR. We've demonstrated the open source and managed tools that you can use to deploy, convert, validate, enhance, export, and analyze the data, which I have little ticks for. So we've done all of these things. We've done the analysis. And you've also seen some of those sample repositories about how you can, where you can go to sort of get started on all of that stuff. How can you contact me? So I've added little icons here, but you can contact me in the Hoover speaker gallery. You can email my team at FHIRserverForAzure@Microsoft.com. And I do occasionally tweet under the alias of Brendan Kowitz, which is not surprising. If you're using a Windows computer and you like these little icons, you can actually hit Windows key and period. And a little box come up with all of these cool icons. Anyway, so more talks from Microsoft. So this is definitely a slide that's worth screenshotting. So some more great Microsoft speakers here going in depth in like I've mentioned, sort of like many of these different pillars. So some really great talks and really great content to sort of wrap your head around more specific topics in FHIR. And that's all the content I have. So I'm going to open it up to Q&A, but thank you for sharing this time with me, and I hope I've given you some valuable insights.
Thank you, Brendan. We have one question on our Q&A board so far. The question goes, does Azure API for FHIR support fine-grained scopes for FHIR resources? E.g., specific app can only read patient condition observation, but does not have any write permissions.
Great question. I'm going to defer this one and just say the only answer I can give you right now is it's in our sites and it's on our backlog, but I have no further updates on that one right now.
I think if anybody else wants to ask him a question right now, you can raise your hand or unmute yourself and ask away.
Cool. So maybe I answered everything, hopefully. If not, yeah, just feel free to hit me up on the Hoover app, or I'm sure I'll see everyone around over DevDays.
I want to say thank you for the tip about the icons on a PC because I didn't know that, and they are very cute. Thank you.
All good. Cool.
Okay, well, I think we can end the session at this point. We don't have any other questions. Thanks, Brendan, for an excellent session and for sharing your knowledge with us. And thanks to our attendees for joining us today. We would appreciate it if you have a few moments to rate the session by clicking on the link in Whova under the session information. And thanks again. That includes our session, and be sure to join us for the wrap up.
Awesome. Thank you.